At my son Daniel's funeral, I overheard my daughter-in-law Sarah whisper, "I'm sure as hell not going to care for that old crone." My heart broke, but I remained silent. Little did she know, Daniel had changed his will just weeks before, leaving everything to me. This is just the beginning of my story. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. The scent of lilies and sorrow hung heavy in the air, a cruel, cloying perfume that seemed to amplify the unbearable ache in Eleanor's chest. Her son Daniel lay still in the polished mahogany casket, his vibrant life extinguished at an impossibly young 35. It had been sudden, a brutal accident that had ripped him from her world without warning, leaving behind only a gaping void where laughter and purpose once thrived. Eleanor stood by his side, a statue of grief, accepting the murmured condolences from relatives and friends. Each soft touch, each whispered, "I'm so sorry," felt like a pinprick against her already raw nerves. She nodded, offered faint, watery smiles, her face a carefully constructed mask designed to hide the profound devastation that threatened to shatter her into a million pieces. As the chapel slowly began to empty, a gentle hand touched her arm. Eleanor turned to see Mr. Thompson, Daniel's longtime attorney, his kind eyes filled with sympathy. "Eleanor," he began softly, his voice low and respectful, "I am so truly sorry for your loss. Daniel was a remarkable young man." He paused, then continued, a subtle shift in his tone. "There are some matters we need to discuss regarding Daniel's estate. Perhaps we could step into a side room for a moment?" Eleanor, numb with sorrow, simply nodded, allowing him to guide her away from the casket, away from the last physical presence of her son. They walked towards a small, tastefully decorated room, typically used for private family gatherings or a moment of quiet reflection. As Mr. Thompson opened the door, a sudden wave of sound, low and conspiratorial, washed over Eleanor. Inside, her daughter-in-law Sarah stood by the window, her back mostly to the door, engaged in an animated, hushed conversation with her sister, Clara. Sarah's voice, though lowered, carried with a sharpness that pierced the quiet solemnity of the funeral home. "I just hope he didn't leave anything substantial to Eleanor," Sarah whispered, the words hitting Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. Eleanor froze, her hand still lightly on Mr. Thompson's arm, a gasp catching in her throat. Mr. Thompson, noticing her sudden rigidity, hesitated, his brow furrowed with concern. Sarah continued, oblivious to their presence, her tone laced with bitter resentment. "I've spent 7 years with him, putting up with his mother always being around, always needing something." She gestured dismissively with the hand. "Honestly, I don't know why he never put his foot down. It's been draining." Clara nodded in agreement, murmuring something inaudible. A cruel laugh escaped Sarah's lips, a sound devoid of mirth, chilling Eleanor to the bone. "Can you imagine his mother moving in with me after all this? I'd rather die." The thought, the sheer callousness of it, twisted a knot in Eleanor's stomach. This was her son's wife, the woman he had loved, the woman who was supposed to share in her grief. The conversation took an even more brutal turn. "No, seriously," Sarah insisted, her voice hardening. "I'm sure as hell not going to care for that old crone too." The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly, stripping away any last vestige of her composure. Old crone. Eleanor felt her breath catch, her heart clenching in a painful vice. The shock of such casual cruelty, spoken on the day of her son's funeral, rendered her utterly speechless. She stared at Sarah's back, her mind reeling, trying to reconcile this venomous stranger with the woman Daniel had married. It was then that Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, a polite but firm sound that announced their presence. Sarah flinched, her conversation cutting off abruptly, her head snapping around. Her eyes, wide with surprise, met Eleanor's for a fleeting second before quickly darting away. Mr. Thompson, stepping forward, his voice calm and professional, addressed Eleanor. "Eleanor, please have a seat." He motioned towards a plush armchair. "Before we proceed, there's something important I need to inform you about." He paused, looking at Sarah and Clara briefly before continuing. "Approximately 3 weeks ago, Daniel made a significant change to his last will and testament." Eleanor's brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion momentarily overshadowing her shock. "A change?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from unshed tears. "Yes," Mr. Thompson confirmed, his gaze steady. Daniel revised his will to leave almost his entire estate to you, Eleanor, not Sarah. The announcement hung in the air, a deafening silence falling upon the small room. Eleanor stared at Mr. Thompson, her mind struggling to process the information. It was as if she had been plunged into an icy bath, the shock of the news momentarily numbing her grief. To me, she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. But why? Why would he? Mr. Thompson's expression remained unreadable. Daniel was very clear about his wishes, Eleanor, and I assure you he was of sound mind when he made these revisions. He understood the implications fully. Just then, Sarah, who had been standing frozen, her face a kaleidoscope of disbelief and dawning fury, seemed to snap back to reality. She caught Eleanor's eye, and in an instant, the mask of contempt that had so clearly been visible moments before vanished, replaced by a contorted expression of exaggerated grief. She rushed forward, her arms outstretched. "Oh, Eleanor, my dear, sweet Eleanor," she cried, her voice suddenly thick with what sounded like manufactured sorrow. "I am just so terribly sorry for everything. My heart breaks for you." She pulled Eleanor into a tight embrace, her grip surprisingly strong. Eleanor recoiled inwardly, feeling a wave of revulsion wash over her. The sweet, cloying perfume Sarah wore, the one Daniel had bought for her, suddenly felt suffocating. As Sarah's cheek pressed against hers, Eleanor's gaze met Mr. Thompson's over Sarah's shoulder. His eyes held a knowing, sympathetic look. It was in that moment, with Sarah's faux embrace tightening around her, that a profound and chilling realization washed over Eleanor. My son knew. He had known Sarah's true nature, her selfishness, her barely concealed resentment. He must have seen it, felt it, experienced it, perhaps even in those final weeks. His last act, the changing of his will, wasn't just about money. It was a desperate, heartbreaking message, a final testament to his love for his mother, and a quiet, devastating condemnation of his wife. The grief in Eleanor's heart deepened, now tinged with a new, sharper pang of understanding, a confirmation of a truth Daniel had carried in his final days. The official reading of the will took place later that week, a stark, uncomfortable affair in Mr. Thompson's office. Sarah sat opposite Eleanor, her face a rigid mask of fury, her sister Clara beside her. As Mr. Thompson formally detailed the distribution of Daniel's assets, confirming that the bulk of his considerable estate, including the family home and significant investments, had been bequeathed solely to Eleanor, Sarah's composure finally shattered. "This is illegal!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the quiet office walls. "Daniel would never have done this. He was not in his right mind. He must have been pressured, or ill, or—" Mr. Thompson calmly intervened. "Mrs. Davis, as I have stated, Daniel was fully sound of mind when he made these changes. All legal procedures were followed, witnessed, and notarized." "I don't believe it," Sarah screamed, pushing back her chair with a violent scrape. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing with raw indignation. "This is an outrage. I was his wife. 7 years. How dare he? How dare you?" She glared at Eleanor, pure hatred simmering in her gaze. Without another word, Sarah snatched her purse and stormed out of the office, Clara scrambling to follow, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Eleanor sat motionless, the memory of Sarah's cruel words, "I'm sure as hell not going to care for that old crone too," ringing in her ears, now interwoven with the equally impactful words from Daniel's final will. 948 words, 3 days crawled by, each hour feeling like an eternity to Eleanor. The world outside Daniel's home seemed a blur, but inside, every object, every photograph, was a painful echo of his presence. Sarah and the children were staying with Sarah's parents, leaving the house unnervingly quiet. It was a silence that offered no comfort, only amplified the emptiness. Eleanor had come to collect some of Daniel's personal effects from his home office, a space that had always been his sanctuary, a place of quiet focus. She opened the door, a faint scent of his cologne still lingering, a ghost of him in the air. The room was meticulously organized, just as Daniel had always kept it. His desk, a sturdy oak piece, was clear of clutter, save for a small framed photo of him and Eleanor at his graduation. As her gaze swept across the desk, something caught her eye. One of the top drawers, usually perfectly flush, was slightly ajar, revealing a glint of metal, a small, ornate key. Daniel, with his fastidious nature, never left anything out of place, let alone a drawer open. It was completely out of character. A prickle of unease, then curiosity, spurred her forward. With a trembling hand, Eleanor pulled the drawer open further. Inside, nestled amongst neatly stacked stationery, was a manila folder, thick and unassuming. Its label, scrawled in Daniel's familiar hand, simply read, "Financial Records." Her heart gave a little lurch. This felt too deliberate, too hidden. She pulled out the folder, her fingers tracing the edges, a sense of foreboding settling over her. As she opened it, a folded piece of paper fluttered out. It was another handwritten note, again in Daniel's precise script. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." The words hit her with a fresh wave of grief, not just for his loss, but for the unspoken burdens he had carried. Inside the folder, the neatly organized documents quickly transformed into a terrifying tapestry of deception. Eleanor's eyes widened in disbelief as she scanned bank statements, credit card bills, and loan agreements. Sarah's name was plastered across page after page, linked to a systematic draining of their joint accounts over the past several months. There were numerous large withdrawals from casinos, endless transactions for online gambling sites, extravagant luxury purchases, and, most horrifyingly, multiple high-interest loans taken out in Daniel's name, loans he had clearly not authorized. The picture that emerged was one of reckless abandonment and profound betrayal. Sarah wasn't just selfish, she was financially destroying them. As Eleanor absorbed the shocking revelations, something small and rectangular slipped from between the documents and clattered softly onto the desk. It was a USB drive. A surge of intuition told her this was no ordinary data stick. She picked it up, her fingers fumbling slightly as she inserted it into Daniel's laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single video file. The date stamp on the file sent a chill down her spine. 3 weeks ago, the very same day Daniel had changed his will. Eleanor clicked the file, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Daniel's face appeared on the screen, tired but resolute. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a weariness that Eleanor now recognized as far more than just stress from work. "Mom," he began, his voice soft but strained, "if you're watching this, then things have probably gotten worse with Sarah, or something has happened to me." He took a shaky breath, his gaze fixed on the camera, as if looking directly into Eleanor's eyes. "I discovered Sarah's gambling problem about 6 months ago. It wasn't just a casual thing, it was compulsive." He paused, gathering himself. "I tried to help her. We went to therapy together, or at least she said she did. I set up separate accounts, thinking it would give her less access, protect us financially." His voice cracked slightly, a raw edge of pain surfacing. "I thought she was getting better." A single tear tracked a path down Daniel's cheek, his composure finally breaking. "But it escalated, Mom. She started taking out loans. Not from banks, from unsavory characters. The kind that have unlawful collection practices. They've been threatening me, threatening to come after the family if the payments aren't made." His confession, delivered with such raw vulnerability, shattered Eleanor. The image of her strong, capable son, reduced to this desperate, fear-filled confession, tore at her soul. "That's why I changed my will, Mom," Daniel continued, his voice barely a whisper, thick with emotion. "I know it's harsh, and I know she'll hate me for it, but if something happens to me, you need to be protected. The house, the investments, they need to go to you. She can't have them. Not now, not when she's in so deep." He wiped furiously at his eyes, his shoulders shaking. "I love her, Mom, I still do, but I can't trust her with our future anymore. I can't let her jeopardize everything, especially the children." The video ended abruptly, leaving Eleanor in a stunned silence, the laptop screen reflecting her tear-streaked face. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Daniel's sudden, unexplained stress over the past few months, the frantic changes to his will, his uncharacteristic carelessness with the drawer, his sudden, untimely death, and Sarah's venomous comments at the funeral, all intertwined, forming a devastating narrative of betrayal and a son's desperate attempt to protect his family. Daniel had been living in a nightmare, silently battling a threat that ultimately consumed him. Just as the full weight of this realization settled upon her, the distant sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Sarah. Eleanor's heart leaped into her throat. She snatched the USB drive from the laptop, shoved it and the manila folder back into the drawer, and pushed it shut, all in a frantic blur. She smoothed her dress, trying to compose herself, to wipe away the visible traces of tears and shock. The office door swung open and Sarah entered, a sweet, almost saccharine smile on her face, a plastic bag swinging from her hand. "Eleanor, honey, are you still here?" she cooed, her voice eerily calm, devoid of any of the rage Eleanor had just witnessed in her son's confession. "I brought dinner. I thought you might be hungry." Eleanor forced a smile onto her trembling lips, her mind racing. The mask of grief and innocence Sarah wore was now a sickening spectacle. She was a viper, a predator. Eleanor looked at the closed drawer, at the life Daniel had fought so desperately to protect. A fierce, protective resolve hardened her heart. She would not let Sarah destroy Daniel's legacy. She would not let his efforts be in vain. 2 months dissolved into a blur of enforced solitude for Eleanor. The initial shock of Daniel's death had been slowly replaced by a creeping sense of isolation. Her phone, once a source of regular chatter and social invitations, now rarely chimed. Invitations to community events, once a staple of her week, simply stopped arriving. Even her beloved bridge club, a sanctuary of friendly competition and camaraderie, quietly dropped her from their roster. The polite excuses were thinly veiled. Mrs. Davies, the group's sharp-tongued matriarch, had been particularly vocal. One afternoon, Eleanor found herself in the grocery store, rounding an aisle, only to overhear Mrs. Davies's distinctive, hushed tones. "Did you hear what Eleanor did to poor Sarah?" she whispered conspiratorially to another woman, her voice dripping with judgment. "Taking everything after Daniel died, leaving his widow and her children with nothing. It's absolutely scandalous." Eleanor froze, a carton of milk slipping from her grasp. The other woman clucked sympathetically. The narrative Sarah had so deftly spun of a greedy, heartless mother-in-law depriving a grieving widow and her innocent children of their rightful inheritance had clearly been widely accepted. Eleanor felt a bitter taste rise in her throat, but the social ostracization, the whispered judgments, were mere pinpricks compared to the gaping wound of restricted access to her grandchildren, Mia and Leo. They were Daniel's legacy, living embodiments of his spirit, and the thought of being cut off from them was unbearable. Her calls to Sarah went unanswered, her texts ignored. When Sarah finally allowed a visit, it was always short, supervised, and tinged with an uncomfortable formality. Mia and Leo seemed quieter, their usual effervescence dimmed, and a subtle wariness in their eyes broke Eleanor's heart. During one such brief, stilted visit, Eleanor found herself unable to contain her anguish any longer. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing juice for the children, her back to Eleanor. "Why are you doing this, Sarah?" Eleanor's voice was low, trembling with suppressed emotion. "Why are you turning everyone against me? Why are you keeping the children away?" Sarah turned, her pleasant mask slipping, revealing the cold, calculating woman Eleanor knew lay beneath. Her smile was tight, devoid of warmth. "Maybe," Sarah replied, her voice eerily calm. "People are just finally seeing you for who you really are, Eleanor. A meddling, manipulative woman who thought she could come between a husband and wife, even in death." Eleanor felt a surge of indignation. "That's not true. Daniel changed his will to protect us, to protect you from yourself. He knew about your gambling, Sarah. He knew about the debts." A flicker of something dark, fear perhaps, or pure malice, crossed Sarah's face. Then she let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that held no humor. She stepped closer to Eleanor, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine. "If you want to see Mia and Leo at all," Sarah hissed, her eyes like chips of ice, "you'll keep your crazy accusations to yourself, and you'll start transferring Daniel's assets back where they belong, to me. Otherwise, you'll never see them again." The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. Sarah's words, combined with the weight of the community's disapproval, sent Eleanor spiraling. Back in her quiet, empty home, she wept, deep, racking sobs that tore at her chest. Had she misread everything? Was Sarah right? Had she truly become the villain in this tragic story? The isolation, the constant whispers, the agonizing separation from her grandchildren? It was all slowly eroding her sense of self, making her doubt her own memories, her own sanity. The next morning, determined to find an ally, to find someone who would listen and believe her, Eleanor drove to Evan's office. He had been the family doctor for over 20 years, a kind and understanding man who had seen her through countless ailments, large and small. Surely he would see through Sarah's charade. Evans greeted her, but his usual warm demeanor was replaced by a cool professionalism. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He motioned her to sit. "Eleanor," he began, his voice carefully neutral. "Sarah contacted me a few days ago. She expressed some rather serious concerns about your mental state." Eleanor's breath hitched. "My mental state?" she repeated, her voice thin. He nodded, consulting a note on his pad. "Yes, she mentioned what she perceives as early signs of dementia. The paranoia," she said, "the mood swings. And," he paused, looking up at Eleanor with a clinical gaze, "this irrational behavior surrounding Daniel's will." The words struck Eleanor like physical blows. Dementia, paranoia, irrational. It was a calculated assault, a systematic dismantling of her credibility. Sarah wasn't just trying to shame her. She was trying to medically invalidate her, to make her testimony worthless, paving the way to challenge the will and seize Daniel's legacy. The realization left Eleanor breathless, a sickening certainty settling in her gut. She could feel the ground crumbling beneath her feet, the carefully constructed life she knew dissolving into suspicion and doubt. Eleanor left Dr. Evans' office in a daze, the sterile smell of antiseptic doing nothing to clear the fog of despair in her mind. She walked out into the harsh sunlight, feeling more alone than ever. Just as she reached her car, her phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. She opened the text message, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. "We need to talk about Sarah. Meet me at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone, Chloe." Eleanor arrived at the Riverside Cafe a full 15 minutes early, her heart thrumming with a mixture of trepidation and desperate hope. She chose a discreet corner table, partially obscured by a potted fern, offering a clear view of the entrance without being overtly conspicuous. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee did little to soothe her frayed nerves. Who was Chloe? Why was Sarah's sister reaching out to her? Promptly at 10 o'clock, a young woman with Sarah's striking features, but a softer, more thoughtful expression, entered the cafe. She scanned the room, her eyes meeting Eleanor's across the tables. It was Chloe. She navigated her way through the bustling morning crowd, slipping into the seat opposite Eleanor. Her first words were a hushed urgency. "Did anyone see you come in, Eleanor?" she whispered, glancing around nervously. Eleanor shook her head, a lump in her throat. "I don't think so." Chloe let out a small breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Good. Look, I know this might be difficult to hear, but I believe you. About everything. The gambling, the loans, all of it." Eleanor stared, dumbfounded. To hear those words, after weeks of isolation and doubt, felt like a lifeline. "But how?" "Sarah," Chloe began, her voice low and filled with a weary resignation, "has a history, a long one. She's always been exploitative." Chloe's eyes hardened slightly. Before Daniel, there was a fiancé, Derek, a sweet man, a little naive. Sarah nearly financially destroyed him with her investments in business ventures that were nothing more than elaborate gambling schemes. He barely escaped with his life savings intact after she almost put him in bankruptcy. Eleanor felt a cold dread creep through her. "But Daniel and Sarah seemed so happy," she weakly protested, recalling the image of them, laughing together at family gatherings. Chloe offered a mirthless smile. "Grace is an excellent actress, Eleanor, and she's a master manipulator. She can make anyone believe anything. She feeds off it, consumes it. Daniel was just the latest in a long line of people she's charmed and then bled dry." Chloe leaned closer. "Our parents, you see, they enabled her. Always have. They always encouraged her to use her charm, her beauty, for financial gain. Never taught her the value of hard work, only how to work a situation." As Chloe spoke, she pulled a small, worn notebook from her purse. It was filled with meticulous, cramped handwriting. "I've been documenting it all," she explained, holding it up. "Sarah's lies about you, her manipulation of Mia and Leo, the stories she spread around the community." Eleanor's eyes scanned the pages, seeing the painful truth laid bare. "She even told our parents," Chloe continued, her voice laced with disgust, "that you were abusive to Daniel, that you controlled him with money, that you manipulated him into changing his will." Eleanor flinched, the sheer audacity of the lies taking her breath away. "Why, guy?" she whispered. "Why would she go to such lengths?" "She's desperate," Chloe stated, her gaze unwavering. "She needs that inheritance, Eleanor. Not just for her lifestyle, though that's part of it. She needs it to cover her tracks." Chloe's voice dropped even lower. "Some of those loans she took out, they're not from legitimate sources. She's connected with some more serious criminals, people who don't take kindly to not getting paid." The implication hung heavy in the air, a chilling threat. "Sarah isn't just spreading rumors to be petty," Chloe warned, her voice firm. "She's methodically destroying your credibility because she's afraid of what you might discover. She's afraid you'll expose her, and that could have very serious consequences for her." Suddenly, a realization, cold and sharp, cut through Eleanor's despair. "She's gaslighting me," she said, the words forming a concrete understanding in her mind. "Making me doubt myself, making others doubt me, so that when I tell the truth, no one will believe me." Chloe nodded grimly. "Exactly. She did the same thing to our grandmother when she was still alive. Convinced everyone our grandmother was losing her mind so she could control her finances. It worked, until Grandma got sick enough that she was hospitalized and couldn't speak for herself anymore." A shiver of fear, far colder than the morning air, ran down Eleanor's spine. The casual ruthlessness of Sarah's actions, the sheer depth of her manipulation, was horrifying. "You need to be careful, Eleanor," Chloe urged, her eyes serious. "Document everything, just like I have. Every interaction, every strange comment, and," she leaned across the table, her voice barely a whisper, "don't take anything she gives you. No food, no drinks, no medication. Not from her or from anyone she might send." Eleanor felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. "Are you saying—" Chloe didn't answer directly, but her gaze was eloquent. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, prepaid burner phone. "Here," she said, pushing it across the table. "Don't use your regular phone to talk about any of this. Use this. Keep it hidden. If you need me or if something happens, you calls this number." She pointed to a pre-programmed contact. As Eleanor took the phone, its cheap plastic feeling oddly significant in her hand, Chloe reached across the table and briefly, reassuringly squeezed her hand. "You're not crazy, Eleanor," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're not the bad guy here. Daniel saw her for who she was, and he trusted you to protect his legacy. We're going to help you do that. The fight has just begun. If you're gripped by Eleanor's journey, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to hear how she unravels the truth and fights back." That evening, a newfound resolve simmered beneath Eleanor's grief. Chloe's words had cut through the fog of self-doubt, igniting a spark of defiance. Back in Daniel's office, the place where she had first discovered Sarah's treachery, Eleanor began to re-examine everything with fresh eyes. She ran her hand over the back of the open drawer, the one where Daniel had hidden the folder. Her fingers brushed against something hard, almost imperceptible. Taped securely to the underside of the drawer was a small silver key, much like the one used for storage units. Beside it, a tiny folded note. "Storage unit number 17, Main Street Lock and Key." A wave of understanding washed over Eleanor. Daniel, ever the meticulous planner, the cautious protector, had foreseen this. He had known Sarah would stop at nothing, and he had made sure his mother would have the means to fight. A fierce sense of purpose settled over Eleanor, chasing away the last vestiges of her despair. Sarah had profoundly underestimated her son, and by extension, herself. The next morning, Eleanor drove to Main Street Lock and Key, her heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. She found Unit 17, a nondescript metal door among dozens of others. The key slid smoothly into the lock, and with a click, she pushed the door open. Inside, the unit was a stark revelation of Daniel's final, desperate struggle. Boxes were neatly stacked, labeled with his precise handwriting. But what immediately caught Eleanor's eye was a large whiteboard propped against the back wall. It was a meticulously charted investigation, a detailed timeline of Sarah's activities spanning 3 years. Dates, amounts, locations, even small, blurry photos of Sarah entering casinos or meeting shadowy figures in parking lots, cash withdrawals, online gambling accounts, unexplained absences from home. It was all laid out with damning clarity. Daniel had been building a case, a comprehensive record of his wife's betrayal. Eleanor approached a box clearly labeled evidence. Inside, she found a treasure trove of damning documents, original bank statements highlighting suspicious transactions, credit card bills with exorbitant luxury purchases, and the original loan documents from various dubious lenders, all taken out in Daniel's name or with forged signatures. Another USB drive, similar to the one she had found earlier, was nestled among the papers. As she delved deeper, her fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound journal. It was Daniel's. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened it, finding his familiar script. The entries detailed his growing suspicion, his attempts to confront Sarah, his heartbreak, and finally his fear. The last entry, dated just 4 days before his death, chilled her to the bone. I confronted Sarah today about the latest gambling debts. It was a disaster. She denied everything at first, then became hysterical, screaming that I was trying to control her, that I didn't trust her. The threats from her creditors are escalating. I fear for the children. I've changed the will today, just in case. Mom needs to be protected, and she needs to be able to protect the kids. I hope it's enough. Eleanor spent hours in that storage unit, systematically photographing every document with the burner phone Chloe had given her. She meticulously pieced together Daniel's investigation, his silent, solitary battle against the woman he had loved. The full scope of Sarah's deception, her cold-hearted manipulation, and Daniel's immense suffering became agonizingly clear. Later that afternoon, tucked away in the safety of her own home, Eleanor used the burner phone to call Chloe. Her voice, though still raw with grief, now carried a steely resolve. "Chloe," she began without preamble, "I found Daniel's evidence. Everything. The full extent of her gambling, her debts, the threats." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "And I think Sarah might have had something to do with Daniel's death." A tense silence stretched on the line. Then Chloe's voice, grave and quiet, responded, "That's a very serious accusation, Eleanor." "I know," Eleanor asserted, her voice firm, "but Daniel confronted her just 4 days before he died. He wrote about it in his journal. And then there's her systematic effort to discredit me, to make me seem crazy, so she can challenge the will without resistance. It's all connected, Chloe. It has to be." She clutched the burner phone tightly. "I can't let her get away with this. Not after what Daniel went through. Not after what she's done to the children." "I want to fight back," Eleanor declared, the words ringing with a newfound strength. "I need your help, Chloe. Will you help me?" 2 days later, Eleanor drove to a neighboring town, deliberately choosing a neurologist Sarah would never know. Dr. Jenkins was a reputable physician, and Eleanor underwent a complete cognitive workup, a battery of tests designed to assess her mental acuity. The results, when Dr. Jenkins presented them, were a vindication. "Eleanor," he stated, his expression kind and professional, "I can confirm you show absolutely no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. Your cognitive functions are excellent for your age." He handed her a detailed written statement. Eleanor clutched the paper, a physical symbol of her regained sanity, a weapon against Sarah's gaslighting. Armed with Dr. Jenkins' report and Daniel's meticulously gathered evidence, Eleanor knew she couldn't proceed alone. She discreetly hired Mike, a private investigator recommended by a distant, trusted friend. His task, to document every single one of Sarah's malicious rumors, every meeting she held, and most crucially, to trace the true sources of her more questionable loans. The fight had truly begun. Eleanor began the arduous task of reclaiming her life and reputation. Her first step was to confront the social isolation Sarah had so cunningly crafted. She started with Martha, her oldest and most trusted friend, who had been noticeably distant. Over tea, Eleanor laid out Dr. Jenkins's pristine neurological report, along with selected pieces of Daniel's meticulous evidence. Martha, her eyes widening with shock and then regret, listened intently. "Eleanor," she whispered, tears welling. "I am so sorry. I let myself be swayed by gossip. I should have known better." This small victory fueled Eleanor. She joined a new bridge club, volunteered at the local library, finding solace in new connections. She even started a blog about her grief journey, carefully weaving in subtle hints about the darker currents she had encountered, resonating with others who had experienced similar manipulations. Each small victory, each renewed connection, strengthened her resolve. Meanwhile, Mike, the private investigator, was proving invaluable. He had a knack for uncovering the uncomfortable truth, and his findings continually reinforced the depth of Sarah's desperation. The most alarming discovery: Sarah owed a staggering sum, over $200,000, to a man named Victor Costa. The name, Mike informed her grimly, was connected to organized crime, a detail that sent a cold shiver down Eleanor's spine. Daniel's fears, whispered in that final video, had been terrifyingly accurate. 2 days later, with Mike's comprehensive report in hand, Eleanor knew it was time. She invited Sarah and the children to dinner. The invitation was simple, warm, with no hint of the confrontation to come. She prepared Daniel's favorite lasagna, her hands moving with a purposeful steadiness. Sarah arrived at the doorstep with a forced, practiced smile, a fragile facade that barely concealed her underlying tension. Mia, now Emma, rushed forward, her small arms wrapping tightly around Eleanor's waist, a spontaneous hug that brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Leo, however, hung back, his gaze wary, a reflection of the conflicting narratives he had been exposed to. Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat, reminding herself that this was for them, for her grandchildren's future. After dinner, with the children happily settled in the living room watching a movie, Eleanor led Sarah to the quiet solitude of Daniel's office. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. Eleanor closed the door, then turned to face Sarah, her voice calm, devoid of anger, but firm with conviction. "I know everything, Sarah," she stated, her gaze unwavering. The gambling, the endless online sites, the luxury purchases that bled Daniel dry, the loans from Victor Costa. She watched Sarah's face drain of color, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. "And," Eleanor continued, "I know about the lies you've spread about me, the attempts to discredit me, to make everyone believe I'm losing my mind." Sarah's eyes flickered with a desperate defiance. "It's your word against mine, Eleanor," she stammered, her voice thin. "Everyone already thinks you're losing your mind. Who would believe you?" Eleanor placed Dr. Jenkins's report on the desk, sliding it towards Sarah. "My neurologist, Dr. Jenkins, begs to differ. He assures me my mind is perfectly sound." She then pulled out a stack of documents. Chloe's meticulously documented notebook, Daniel's financial records from the hidden folder, copies of his journal entries, and Mike's report detailing the $200,000 debt to Victor Costa, complete with dates and transaction details. "And these," Eleanor swept her hand over the evidence, "these are not just my words. These are facts. Daniel's facts, Chloe's facts, and Mr. Costa's very real demands." Sarah's hands began to tremble, her bravado dissolving into genuine fear. She looked at the documents, her face ashen. What do you want?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want a truce, Sarah," Eleanor replied, her tone softening slightly, but maintaining its underlying steel. "I want regular, unhindered access to Mia and Leo. No more canceled visits, no more unanswered calls. I want the rumors to stop completely, and I want you to get help. Real help for your gambling addiction." Eleanor paused, letting her words sink in. "If you refuse," she continued, her voice gaining an edge of finality, "I will take all of this evidence to the police. Not just the fraud, Sarah, but the suspicious timing of Daniel's death, just days after he confronted you and changed his will." The implication hung in the air, chilling and undeniable. Sarah's face crumpled. She collapsed into a chair, her shoulders shaking. Silent sobs racking her frame. "I didn't kill him," she whispered, her voice raw with desperation. "I swear I didn't. The stress, The fight we had, maybe that contributed. I don't know, but I never wanted him dead. Never. Eleanor watched her, a complex mix of pity and lingering anger swirling within her. She believed Sarah in that moment. Sarah's selfishness, her recklessness, her addiction, these were her demons. But murder? Eleanor didn't think so. For the sake of Mia and Leo, for the hope of a peaceful future, a compromise was necessary. I will pay off Victor Costa's debt, Eleanor said, her decision firm. That will be part of our truce. But you seek treatment, and you keep your end of the bargain. 3 years later, Eleanor watched Mia and Leo play in her sun-drenched garden, their laughter echoing through the vibrant blooms. They spent weekends with her, their bond strong and unshaken. Sarah, true to her word, had completed her gambling addiction treatment, attending regular therapy sessions and support groups. She still lived in Daniel's house, which now, legally, was in Eleanor's name. This arrangement ensured Sarah's continued cooperation and accountability, a quiet assertion of Eleanor's control without outright dispossessing her. Eleanor's relationship with Sarah was still complicated, a fragile piece built on a foundation of necessary compromise and their shared, undeniable love for Mia, and Leo. Daniel's inheritance money, now carefully managed, funded trust funds for Mia and Leo's education, modest renovations to Eleanor's home, and Sarah's ongoing treatment. Eleanor often wondered if Daniel would approve of her compromise. He had been a practical man and deeply compassionate, even to a fault. She believed he would. His ultimate wish was to protect his children, and Eleanor had done just that, albeit through an unconventional path. She had also fulfilled a promise to him, scattering his ashes in the rolling hills of Tuscany, a place he had always dreamed of visiting. And in her garden, a living memorial of his spirit thrived, a space of growth, resilience, and the beautiful chaos of family. It was, Eleanor realized, a second chance at family, this hard-won peace.